Hello, fellow travelers, and welcome to the Traversing the Stars podcast. How are my loyal listeners? Thank you for your continued support. And as always, hit that subscribe button, everybody. We have an amazing show for you all because aboard the mothership is Michael O'Neill. You know him as Secret Agent Ron Butterfield on The West Wing. He recently played Victor McCleary in Echoes, available on Netflix. Now come join me as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. O'Neill. Thank you so much for coming to the Traversing the Stars podcast.
Hey, it's nice to join you, Jeff.
It's totally my honor, sir. I've been a big fan of yours always since The West Wing.
Well, one of my very favorite shows. You know, you can tell a lot about a man about what he watches. So I appreciate that we're on the same page there. That was a very, very important show for me.
For me, it's definitely one of my favorite shows, and I will say it's one of those comfort shows that I always go back to. And I'm even rewatching it right now. I think I'm on season 2 all over again.
No, I understand. I mean, there's always something to pick up in it, and sometimes the dialogue was so fast, you have to hit stop, rewind to catch all of it. I mean, that repartee was really quick, but it was a wonderful company of actors to work with, with a brilliant writing team, obviously, and a subject we all cared about. So it doesn't happen all the time.
I mean, did it just so happen that this is a show that found you, or did you seek out a show like that to be on?
It's funny, Jeff. I had when I first was introduced to the show, my agents called me, and Butterfield only appeared one time, one episode. Mr. Willis of Ohio, the 6th episode that they shot. And I said to them, "Are you crazy? This is the best writing on television. I don't want to go in for one." And they went, "Michael, you just had twins," which was true. My wife had just delivered. She said, "Go to work." So I went in, and I had worked with John Spencer before. We had done a play together and also a film together. So my very first day, John took me by the hand. He played Leo. He took me by the hand and he introduced me to the rest of the cast. He was vouching for me. He's one of ours. And from that moment on, they treated me like I was part of the family. So we shot those scenes, and the script supervisor walked over to me and said, "They like you upstairs. You'll be back."
Nice.
Now, can I tell you this, Jeff? As an actor, whenever they say that to you, you go, man, because you never go back. It's like they mean, I can't tell you how many times I've heard that, and you never go back. They did. They kept bringing Butterfield back, thank goodness, because we had some great episodes together.
And you did such a wonderful job. I mean, your character, like I said, even though you didn't have so many scenes, the scenes you were in, you added so much to your character. You had poise. You felt like there was compassion there, like a true empathy for what you were doing. You had strength. You had this sense that you're going to kick someone's ass if they screwed with you in any given moment. I mean, that's a lot to put in a very short window of any given amount of dialogue or scenes. How did you do that?
Secret Service. Secret Service was really generous to me. We were going back to Washington a lot. And I'm not the smartest actor out there, but I was smart enough to go to them and go, "Can I trail, And they said, "Well, as much as we can allow it." Yeah. And they talked to me a lot. And, I watched them carefully. Jerry Parr, who was the man who pushed Reagan in the limo when the shooting started and actually got him to George Washington Hospital and saved his life. Jerry Parr went through that entire incident with me, moment by moment, beat by beat. And I ultimately relayed that to Aaron, who then, of course, wrote it into The Shadow of the Gunman, Part 1 and 2. But I learned a lot from those guys, and more than that, they were heroic to me. We think of them as being, protectors, but I don't think people understand that their first response is to cover and extract, which means they are to cover that president and extract him. Basically, they become a human shield. And I thought, what kind of person has that in them?
Right.
I really, more than anything, I wanted to pay homage to what they did and the dignity with which they did it. So that's what I was trying to do.
Now, when you're being around the Secret Service agents, and you're trying to get a sense of their essence, what is it that you took away that was the prime aspect of these people who do a job like this, that you wanted to emulate in your character, Agent Butterfield?
Well, they say that there are people that will step toward trouble.
Yeah.
There are people that, there's, if we were talking about it in a primitive sense, they would stand at the mouth of the cave and say, "You don't come in here.
Mm.
This is our tribe. You don't come in here. You don't hurt them." And that's kind of who they were in a modern day sense. They were that they were the people that protected the tribe.
Mm.
So I had such regard for them, and I've talked to a lot of them. I maintain contact with a lot of them and see them from time to time. And it's just I don't know what it is, and I've heard it said that there's a very specific part of the brain in those people, and you see it in other people as well that will step into a
Mm.
situation, triage somebody who's hurt, or step in when a shooter's, involved and address the shooter. Whatever that is very specific, and they seem to have it, and I wanted to try to portray it, if I could.
Now, I mean, I understand. I mean, I'm married to my lovely wife, and I can understand. And I hope in the situation calls for it, I'd protect my wife and stand in front of my wife. But these secret agents are sitting in front of people who are not connected to them in that way. They're not family. They're not children, parents, whatever. Are they when they're putting in their head to protect these people? Are they protecting the person? Are they protecting the station? Are they protecting an ideal? What is it that drives them to want to protect the individual?
It's an interesting question, Jeff, and I agree with you. I mean, I think there's something in all of us that would protect our spouse or our
Right.
child or something. But when you're talking about that, a lot of it has to be training. I mean, the selection process. There are a lot of people that apply to the Secret Service, and whatever that testing looks like, and I really don't know what that aspect of it is. But I think what they find ultimately are those people that can be trained into the responsibility of it. And I think initially it's protecting the position of the state, the office
Mm.
of the president. But it can't help but become personal
Mm.
because you spend so much time. And although I do know this, we stop hearing, we stop listening. When they're talking, when you're in that car with them and they're talking business of the nation, that's not your purview as a Secret Service agent. Your purview is if anything happens, you take care of POTUS. So I think part of it is training, but I do think eventually it becomes personal.
Mm. So when you're playing Agent Butterfield, and like I said, there's so many great scenes that you had in there. Like I said, the shot of two gunmen. Once again, you sit when you're in the car and you're talking
Yeah,
about, and he's talking about, that you're look at your hand. You're like, no, I'm fine. All this other stuff. But the scene that kind of gets me, and I'm going to probably get the dialogue exactly wrong, but I think it's in the second episode, or it could be this, when you're talking to Toby, and Toby's
yeah,
upset about the canopy, and you're like, and you're trying to make him feel better. He's talking about your hand being shot. You're like, you're trying to comfort him. That's such a
yeah.
wonderful scene. I mean, can you kind of talk to me through a little bit about what that was like to perform, what you were thinking when you were doing it?
Sure. I mean, I had other considerations besides Toby because we start that scene with me saying, "Get those people back, and if they try to move in again, cuff them to the parking meters." Right.
Yeah.
And then Toby and I start the walk, and he starts talking to me about you know the canopy. He was concerned about the canopy. And the response to that, ultimately, I thought it was an interesting piece of writing that Aaron did. He said, "I would never let you not let me do my job."
Mm.
So that was for me the thematically what the scene was about. You don't have to worry. I am going to do my job, Toby, at all costs. And you do your job. That was a decision that you made inside your job. And that's not what the president that's not why he got shot. And when I talked about, we had the shooters down in 3.2 seconds from the time the first shot went off. So
Yeah.
people did their jobs. And then one of my favorite lines in that scene, Jeff, and sometimes when somebody comes up to me, and they're a West Wing fan and they say, I love Butterfield. I go, sorry, Secret Service doesn't comment on procedure.
Oh yeah, yeah.
It's just,
I mean, it was so perfect. And I mean, the timing, the way the repertoire you have with Toby's the character. I totally forgot the guy's name off my head. I feel bad about
Richard
that.
Schiff.
Richard
Richard,
Schiff. Thank you
yeah.
so much. And I've watched it so many times, I totally forgot the actor's name. But I mean, it's perfect. The dialogue, and it's the snappy dialogue as well. I mean, it is a poetry to how well these words bounce off each other.
We knew we had something special, Jeff, in terms of, Aaron's brilliant. Sorkin is brilliant.
Mm.
I don't know any other way to describe it because nobody writes quite that way. and he was also he had the benefit of having a lot of New York actors that understood what an ensemble was. All those guys had worked stage. A lot of them had worked stage together. Allison Janney came off the stage. Richard, Richard did. Martin had that experience in New York. Brad Whitford was a wonderful stage actor. So when they were together, they knew it, and Spencer was, Spencer was a guy in New York, Jeff. When Spencer did a play, there'd be a hum in the theater community. Hey, John Spencer's doing a play over at Manhattan Theater Club. Spencer's going to be on stage at Circle Rep. It was like we all wanted to see what that guy was going to do next. He was that good. He was like, okay, what's John going to do with this role? So my point is that they were a great ensemble, and they cared about one another as a company of actors, and they realized, they knew they had great writing on their hands, and you don't always get that. So that was a special time for all of us.
When you're a recurring character and you show up on the show with these actors who have that great chemistry with all each other, they've been doing it for a while. They're, the snap of the dialogue, the timing. How do you jump in? And it's almost like it's taking the relay race, like in the moment where it's at the peak of its race and you're jumping in. How do you jump into that timing?
If you look at my resume, I've been a guest on a lot of shows over the years, and it's different. It's different for each one, but you're right. They have a shorthand. It's their show, their crew. They're being written for in rhythm. So you're trying to find a way in. Now, my way into the West Wing was the fact that John Spencer took me by the hand and introduced me to everybody. That being vouched for that way, that I've never had that. That's the only time that's ever happened. But sometimes you have to figure out a way. When you're a guest, your job is to lift some of the weight of the story off those lead actors, because they're grinding it out week after week after week. So you come in, at least as a guest like that, my job is to kind of help them move that story and take some of the weight off, and hopefully be involved in the turn. And when I say that, I mean there's going to be an event that happens that once it happens, you can't go back.
Right.
You don't go back. It's the turn of the play. It's a turn of the script. It's, and you want to be involved in that. Sometimes you get very quiet, and just let it come to you. Sometimes you go in and compliment them, tell them how much you've enjoyed watching them. So you just, and you disarm them a little bit. I'm not sure I want you to quote me on that one, but you have to, whatever the way is, you have to find your way in, because you are the guest, they are the regulars. It's their show, their crew, their time. And you just do the best you can with each one. And occasionally it doesn't work out. Occasionally, rare. And it's even more rare because I've been doing it a long time and they know me now. They know what I can do. They've seen me in other shows. So they're like, oh, okay, yeah, come play with us, But in the early days, it was harder.
The show West Wing's been off for a while. I'm trying to remember when we're talking maybe almost 15 years, 17 years, something like that.
Yeah,
it's been
2007, 6 or 7, we came out. Yeah, finished up.
And the show is still talked about, praised. For me, it's one of those comfort shows where I loop it way more than I probably should. But I love it so much. What was it like to know you're a part of something that, in a way, the West Wing kind of has a fan base that's sort of almost like Star Trek and Stargate, but for the West Wing. What is that like for you?
It was important. It was important for me for a couple of reasons, and it's very important that I'm considered part of that, because it was historic in terms of television. The conventional wisdom in Hollywood was that you cannot make a show about DC. You just can't do it. And Aaron, in that mind of his, must have gone, well, we'll see. Because he made it, and it, I think it won like 4 Emmys in a row, best show. It won a Peabody. It just, all kinds of good things came toward that show. It's wonderfully historically to have been part of it. It was important for my career because as an actor in Hollywood, I always say there's a membrane, And as an actor, you get through that membrane and you get to work, and then you get pushed back out. The West Wing pushed me through the membrane, and it wouldn't let me out again. There was no, once I was, because of that show, once I was in, I was in. It was a remarkable kind of community and validation, and then people wanted to, they wanted to work with Butterfield, I guess.
And I think the great thing is too, as a fan, I mean, no matter how cynical you can be, you look at the West Wing and the people, the characters, and you think, God, I wish these were real people. I wish the president was like that. I wish the chief of staff cared that much, and all this other stuff.
Yeah.
It's like a beautiful political fantasy, and it's wonderful.
Yeah, I mean, it's aspirational, I think, about what Washington D.C. could be.
Yeah.
And people like to think that that's the government in service at its best. There is an entire generation, Jeff, in Washington, D.C. that went there because of the West Wing. They went to be of service to the United States of America because they saw that show and they saw the possibility of what they could do. And there are a lot of them that are still there. I mean, the numbers have diminished over the years, but I met a lot of young people, and they were there because of the show, because we filmed a lot there. So I thought that was quite a profound impact to have on the working machinery of government.
I think it is, especially because it is from a good place. It's not, about the power of the position. It's not about the cynical nature of it. It really comes from a good place. That show is trying to encourage you,
Yeah, I agree with you. So much of, I don't know, on some levels, whenever it's a, popularity contest or you have to win an election, it's about me, 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 me.
Yep.
Look at me, what I did. Here's what I did. And there was something in that show that transcended that. It was about us.
And I think also what I loved about it is that they weren't perfect. They wasn't like every episode was like, hey, they won the day. Sometimes they lost. Sometimes they lost badly. And that was part of the point too. They kept trying, they failed, but it was always the day that tomorrow we're giving it another shot,
Yeah. Yeah. We'll suit up and show up again. Yeah. I agree with you. That was interesting. He did that. And Aaron would take, advice from both sides of the political spectrum. He would sit down and talk. I know Dee Dee Myers was on one side, but there was a Republican operative that was, I can't think of his name right now, Jeff, I'm sorry. But they would have long discussions about stuff and different points of view. And then Aaron would go away and write the show. And he ended up bringing characters on. I remember Emily Proctor came on the show.
Yeah.
You remember that?
Oh, yeah. I do. Ainsley Hayes.
So there was, yeah. So there was an attempt, I think, at dialogue, at a conversation about what the possibilities are and the difference of opinion.
And I remember when the show first came out, I didn't watch the show when it first came out. It came out right around the Bill Clinton, Monica Lewinsky thing. I was thinking, oh, Jesus Christ. I was like, what is this going to, and I thought to myself, what is, this is going to be one of those shows that are going to try to milk off what was going on with that. And I came into it very cynically. I think it took a couple of seasons in before some people kept talking. I was like, all right, I'm going to check this out. And I was surprised by it. Now, knowing what the show is in that perfect moment that it came out of, do you think the show would have lasted or would have made it to TV if it came out now? Do you think people could have accepted, or it would have been too cynical nowadays?
It may have been too optimistic. It may have been the other side of that coin. Because there's always a dissonance scale in an audience. If you tip too far, they just stop believing. And I think that we were in a period of time when people actually believe government might be able to function that way. I don't know about right now. I just don't know. It might be a wonderful example, and it may get traction that way. Okay, this is our better selves. This is how we should be.
Right.
But we've taken some hits here lately, so I don't know.
And because looking, so I frequent social media, obviously in the West Wing Facebook groups, stuff like that. And the one thing everyone talks about because of the streaming era we're in is bringing back the show, bring back the West Wing. And a lot of people talk about it, and I keep wondering, like, if you did, could you make it the West Wing still? And I'm thinking, especially after the last 4 years, maybe 6 years ago or so, that people would be thinking, unless it really got dirty, I don't know if people would have accepted it.
Yeah, I don't know how it would play in this environment. I agree with you, because things have gotten I've heard before politics are a blood sport, but
Mm,
there have been so many elbows thrown,
mm,
in the last 6 years that, and the timber of what's, what we used to consider a decorum that you didn't break, that a lot of that's been shattered. So I just don't know if the wing would have the opportunity to get the traction,
mm,
in this environment. And then again, it may be exactly what's needed for people to go, oh, wait a minute, let's take a break. Let's step
mm.
back here and see if we can figure out a way to unravel the knot we've gotten ourselves into.
Right, right, right.
So I'd love to find out,
I,
you know.
I would too. I think it would be a great show, and I think you listen to the Facebook groups are constantly like, Sam would be the president, or Jimmy Smith would have to come back and be the president. I mean, there's so many great characters that you could bring back,
Yeah,
and there's so many stories to tell because once again, history keeps moving. There's always something else now to argue and discuss. I don't know.
yeah.
I wanted to see. I want to see it, but unfortunately, I have no power.
Well, let me put it this way. I'm glad there's still an appetite.
Indeed.
I'm glad there's still interest and an appetite for it. I think it speaks to a touchstone of something, in our culture, that there's, an interest in, if I dare say, a hunger for it.
I think so. I mean, the Facebook groups. I mean, the fact that every episode is analyzed and stared at and pulled apart, it tells you there's that desire for it, and it's quoted. There's always you can always quote The West Wing in any given situation.
Yeah, yeah, it's funny, isn't it? But yeah, there's a legion of people that have done that, and now with social media, the presence it's elevated again,
Right,
yet
right.
another time. I'm
and
glad you continue to watch it though, because it is inspiring.
it always gets better. I mean, I some episodes I appreciate more than other ones. Some, you know, I tend to rewatch more, more than I had used to. But I don't know, it always makes me happy. In a rough day at work, come home, West Wing, old friends, see how they're doing.
Yeah, it's funny. My oldest daughter came home from high school one day, a civics class she had in high school, and she said, "Dad, you were on the TV today in my civics class." I said, "What?" She said, they used the West Wing as an example for something. And I said, "Well, how did you handle that?" She said, "I just kept my mouth shut. No one said
Well, I know in the hallway of the school, because I'm the English teacher. So in the hallway of the school, I use a quote from The West Wing where they quoted somebody else. I'm trying to remember the exact quote, but something along the lines of, it was in Dead Irish Writers was the name of the episode, and the character played by the British ambassador of the time says, I'm trying to remember exactly what the quote was. History, but it's the one where he's Toby talking to the British ambassador and Dead Irish Poets, and he's using a quote about how history, there's no past, there's no future, just now happening over and over again, something along those
over again?
lines.
Yes, yes,
And I
yeah,
have that on the wall, and I'm thinking to myself, that is a perfect quote.
it is. And it's sobering if one takes it in,
Yeah.
you know, because we can affect the now. I mean, we
Mm.
obviously can't do anything, about history. There's a wonderful Robert Frost poem that I learned when I was a young actor, something to the effect that we live more in the past than in the future,
Mm.
and and no, we live more in the future than in the present, and less in both together than in the past.
Oh, that's great.
The present is too much for the senses, too crowding, too confusing, too present to imagine. You know, and I thought, yeah, I guess we do live in the past a lot. It's
Mm.
hard to stay in the present.
No, I agree with you 100%. I will say I wish, because sometimes now that I'm in a new school right now, I just started where I teach to it's a drug and recovery school that I teach at. So now I'm the only teacher, so I teach all the subjects for the most part. And for history, the West Wing's popping up. When I talk about social studies and history, it's got to pop up. But
Yeah,
and that's why I think it would be good for new episodes, because sometimes kids tune out what's old. If they can tell that's an old looking, they'll immediately try to tune it out a little bit. But it'd
yeah.
be nice if something was new with some newer, fresher voices, and they could, watch it in the
Good for you,
class.
by the way, for doing that work.
Oh,
That's not
thank
easy.
you.
I've
It
spent
is
some
not.
time in that world, and it's not easy, but incredibly rewarding to see somebody get their life back. You know what I
Well,
mean?
what did you do when you mean you did spend some time? Is it as a mentor, as a teacher, as?
Well, yeah, there was a halfway house in
Mm,
Birmingham when I lived there, and I was involved with, working working with them a bit, and also raising money for them and stuff like that. It's just, it's very, that I don't think we realize the degree and the depth of the problem. In this particular halfway house, it was mothers.
Mm,
So when you can get a mother back on the right path, then you're affecting the children, which is
mm,
affecting the future.
right.
You know, and so it was incredibly rewarding work. And I remember talking to some what they call diversion courts, drug courts, about the work that they were doing. I spoke at a conference of drug court professionals, and hard work, hard. You know, you have to be willing to live with failure. But
Mm.
when you get those successes, and they're more, you know, as they come. Anyway, just want to say I respect very much that you're doing that. Yeah.
One thing I did always wonder, a lot of the characters you do play are very strong characters, very confident. Why do you think you fit those roles so well? Is it from a past that you've built upon, or is it an air that you've been able to just portray all the time?
You know, I think people project things on you sometimes. Honestly, Jeff, it's the mustache. They see mustache, they think military, they think CIA, they think FBI, they think police, law enforcement, something like that. Um, that's part of it, and part of sense of calm, or an ability to take charge and step into a situation, as opposed to running away from it. So I think whatever it's hard to define from inside out. I don't
Mm,
know exactly, but from the outside in, I'm guessing that they just, they see something that, they believe that they can take charge of it and fix it. It's funny because a couple of times in my career, I've had that flipped, where
mm,
as opposed to being the problem solver, I was the problem.
mm.
and and it's interesting, to as an actor, you want to be able to play a lot of different stuff, but yeah, that I suspect it has to do sort of with bearing and appearance. I know I spent enough time. Ironically, I wasn't in the military. I came out of college at the time that Vietnam was winding down. I was eligible and actually had a very, very low number, and they basically said, "We don't want you.
Really?
We're in forced reduction right now, so you're not going in." Because I thought I was. And but I had spent time in ROTC. I'd spent time with a lot of military people. I'd been to Fort Benning and done some, rappelling and jump school kind of stuff. And so I knew the military environment pretty well.
Mm.
And so those roles, I knew how to replicate what I'd seen, maybe
Now,
a
how
good
do
imitate.
now sometimes, I know sometimes fans confuse fiction with reality, especially with actors. Now, because of the characters you've played, have you seen that fans of yours are intimidated by you, or intimidated to go up to you and be like, "Oh, hey, Mr. Roney," or do you think that they just are able to be like, "Hey, no, he's just cool"?
It's funny. Probably a little bit of both, a little bit, but for the most part, I think I'm not. I'm pretty much a knucklehead in life. Yeah. So if they want to talk, I'll talk to them. I don't have a. I'm not. There's nothing standoffish about me. I don't usually see them see me. If my wife is with me, she'll clock it. You
Oh.
know, and they'll finally kind of look over and go, "Excuse me, could I get a picture of my wife?" Says, "Hand me your phone, honey," and she'll just
Oh.
snap the shot. But
Oh, that's very
yeah,
nice of you. Some actors are very standoffish about that kind of stuff. That's pretty cool of you.
I worked with an old character actor when I was just starting out. A character actor named Will Gear played the grandfather on the Waltons. A lot of people don't remember because we're talking about the '70s, early '70s. But Will always said it's much more important for you to be uh, interested in them than for them to be interested in you.
Mm,
It'll make you a better actor. And I didn't understand fully at the time, but I understand what he's talking about in terms of, you know, as an actor working with another actor, you're totally dependent on them for your
mm.
performance. So you better be interested in what's going on. And he said, just, be interested in people. You'll learn a lot. So that's sort of the course I've tried to follow.
Well, right now you're playing Victor McCleary in the TV show Echoes on Netflix, which is
Yes,
you
sir.
did a fantastic job in it, by the way. I thought you were
Thank
awesome.
you.
So, how did you
Thank
get
you.
involved with the show, and what intrigued you about it?
I had worked with Michelle before, so I knew what kind of actress she was, and also I had worked with the executive producer Quentin Peoples before, and I knew what kind of exec he and writer he was. So when the opportunity came up, there really wasn't a whole lot of there was not a hesitation at all, quite frankly. Um, I was in a bit of a unique position because in life I have identical girls. I have identical twin girls. And the device of Echoes, the story is that these girls swap
Mm,
lives, and they do it all the way into adulthood, which means they're swapping families and
yeah.
swapping locations, which ultimately is a big problem. When one of the twins disappears, the construct begins to collapse on itself, and the other tries to keep it elevated by playing both
Mm,
twins. Difficult at best. And I play their father. Well, I'd seen my girls, swap roles,
really?
uh, just to, when they were little. They
Yeah.
would do it as just to see what they could get away with sometimes. But the notion to me of that going into adulthood, that's damage.
Mm,
And what's happened in the show is it's created tremendous suspense. It's a suspense thriller.
right,
I
right,
mean, once you start it, I was like, oh my God, and I'd shot it and I was still kind of
right, right.
like leaning toward the television. Um, and they lose their mom, early. And I think that blinds the father to what's going on. He lost his partner and he was overwhelmed by having three daughters, and so he really lost the ability to discern that they were doing that,
Mm,
you know. And yeah, it's a lovely show, wonderful cast. Matt Bomer, Karen Robinson, David
mm.
Sanjay, and yeah, yeah,
Well,
good people, good
well,
play.
well, one interesting part about the show is that the father can't tell that they're swapping. Now, as a father of identical twins, can you figure it out on are you able to do it?
Well, there have been times that they fool me, even as they got older, and I don't know that they meant to fool me. What always confused me, Jeff, they would swap personality traits.
Mm,
And when that happened, I couldn't tell them apart. And, pretty soon they would swap back. I think it was an
right.
organic thing, maybe some sort of a mimicking. I don't really know what causes that because, you know, nobody knows why that egg splits. They
Mm,
don't know. They still don't know. They know certain aspects of twindom based on when it splits, like mirror image twins, that happens at a certain time. But um, it was kind of fascinating to me that's when I simply couldn't tell them apart. And it wasn't that they would look different. They look
mm,
different. Didn't matter. They'd swap personality traits, and that fooled me.
mm. Now, the one interesting about you doing the performance, and I'm trying not to. I'm being careful of spoilers here, so
Yeah, I hear you.
I'm gonna tiptoe a little bit.
Thank you.
There's an element about the father that's questionable throughout the show until the last episode.
Yes.
It has to do with the integrity or whatever of the father. Well, I think that's the closest I can go to it without spoiling it. So when you're doing the performance, you need to make both possibilities possible. So how do you walk a line where you can make both things seem both equally true and equally impossible at the same time?
Hardest part of the job. I mean,
Mm,
you define the problem of the character, really,
yeah.
and then how you go about um, dropping a clue here and dropping a clue there, and then dropping a cover
Mm.
here and dropping a cover there. And I hope I was successful in doing it. I imagine the editor was more successful at it than I. Do you know what I mean?
Right, right, right,
God
right.
bless editors, man. They've saved a lot of us. But yeah, it really was the difficulty of that character was that he held something in his history that ultimately is important, but you can't tip it.
I,
Can't
I
tip it.
I will say I was unsure until the very end on what the reality of it was. And on some level, I mean, depending on how you feel about the two main characters, Gina and Lainey,
Mhm.
you do wonder which ones is their reality, because they're telling the story. You get the truth through them,
Yeah.
but they're questionable too, and based on how they behave. So you're still kind of up in the air, like, well, are we trusting this character then or that character? Because they're both at that point unreliable.
Yeah, that's a fascinating piece of writing, really,
Yeah,
to lead, as to do that to an audience, and Michelle's performance, quite frankly,
yeah,
was stunning and really difficult to do. She's ostensibly playing four characters.
yeah.
She's playing one twin being the other twin, and vice versa. And I would agree with you that, it is a suspense. It's also a mystery
Yeah.
and ultimately a thriller.
Mm.
So, if you were describing it in the byline, a Netflix byline, that's probably what would come up: suspense thriller, but it's a mystery.
Now, I don't think this is a spoiler because it happens pretty early in the show. So if it is, welcome to tell me to cut it, and I'll cut it.
Okay.
It's revealed that the character has an illness. That I think this happens early in the first couple of episodes. So it's not,
Yeah. Pretty
it's,
early.
yeah. So I don't know if it's total spoiler because it's kind of early. So when you're also playing that aspect of a character, are you playing? There's a vulnerability when a character knows it has that kind of illness to it. Is
Yeah.
How do you incorporate that as well?
Well, there's certain physical aspects of it that you want to honor, but again, you only want to plant the seed of it. You don't want the audience sort of going, "Oh, is that?" You know.
Mm,
Um, what I loved about the way it was presented, Jeff, was he played it off a little bit, as any father would.
mm,
You know, if you're confiding in your daughters, you don't want to make it a huge deal. You just, you just tell them this is what it is, and so this is what I'd like. And it was an interesting, as the challenge of the actor was how much to bring it to bear. How
mm.
much did it affect? How much did you see it? When did you see it? And I had long conversations with the head writers about it, because I thought it should show up at one point, and they said, "No, we don't really want it there. We want it later." I said, "You know what? You're the boss. I do what you say."
So, but when you do have when you do go with, like I said, you said the writers, you had this idea and the writers had that idea. How easy to incorporate what someone else wants from what you want to do with your character?
Well, if you have a really strong, if you know in your heart of hearts that that character has that going on, you better fight for it. You better get your
Mm,
shoulder behind it and fight for it. In this particular instance, because of the nature of the way the mystery was playing out, I wanted to make sure that I meshed with the mystery. And so it made more sense to try to accommodate their overall understanding of how our journey took place.
mm,
So it wasn't, I wasn't squashed at all. They didn't go, "No, no, you can't do it." No, you know,
yeah.
when somebody does that, you tend to bridle a little bit and go, "Well, we'll see. We'll see if I'm going to do that or not." You know, but they were quite helpful and informative about why they were trying to move it along the way that they were moving it along. And then oh, okay, now I understand. I understand how that affects the story or doesn't affect the story. But I heard a director once say, "I never won an argument with an actor. If I won, I lost." And
Really?
and what he was basically saying is, if you yank an actor's instinct away from him, you're just not going to get the performance you might have got.
Mm. Oh, I totally,
So,
yeah. There actually was uh, I had an interview a couple weeks back with a guy, William B. Davis, who wrote a book
hmm
on acting in life. Is the name of the book, and he talks a lot about the actor and the objective, and how the difficulty of acting with a director sometimes, and you kind of, that being the director needs to kind of almost butt out of what the actor wants to do. Um, as the actor, how do you, I guess, build the rapport with the director where you're both feeling like you're accomplishing something?
yeah, I like the collaboration. I think the very nature of what we do is collaborative. I'm collaborating with a writer. I'm collaborating with a director. I'm collaborating with another actor. So the nature of it is collaborative for me. And I generally find that those suggestions, unless I just find them dead wrong and I go, you know what, I don't know how to do that. I don't know how to do what you're saying. I don't, it doesn't, it's not in this character, right? And usually if they're hearing me, they go along. Rarely, Jeff, have I been in a situation where somebody would say something. What happens sometimes is that a director confuses you. That they have a direction that just confuses you, and so what I find is I just go, oh yeah, and then I go do what I was going to do. Because if you go, oh yeah, then they go, okay, you heard me, great, now go back to Video Village. But if you go, no, that's bullshit, I'm not doing that, then you're going to stand there and jaw back and forth until neither one of you are happy. So I just go, oh yeah, okay, and then I go do my thing, and he'll go, okay, yeah, it's not quite it. You get that? Yeah, okay, and then I do it again, and finally he gets tired. He's got cut. Let's go, move on. That's our secret. There's some directors going to go, that son of a bitch.
Well, one decision I imagine you had to make playing Mr. McCleary is that when you're looking at the family, okay, so we know what happens to the mother without giving too much away. The character Gina is very troubled. Then you have Lainey and the other daughter, I forgot the other daughter's name, who's in the wheelchair, who is due to
Alice Stoker is that actress. God, she was wonderful.
Yeah,
bless her. Yeah.
So as you're playing the character, do you interpret whether or not he thinks he was a good father or not?
That's a great question, Jeff. I don't know if I ever asked myself that question. I think I knew that I loved my girls. And I looked, as a single parent who also was dealing with the loss of the woman that he loved, which, they all lost. The children certainly lost, but Victor lost as well. And I don't know that he handled his own grief well enough. I think he didn't see a lot that was happening with the girls because of his own grief.
So the question was, do you think he considered himself, or when you're playing him, did you consider that he thought of himself as a good father?
I thought he thought of himself as an adequate father. I thought of him as a present father. He missed a lot in his presence because he was a single dad and he was working a ranch. So there was a lot growing up. He just took for granted that they were okay, and they weren't. They weren't. But I don't think he thought he was bad. I think he just went by.
Like too busy to notice, basically, how that works.
Or too preoccupied, or too hurt, or too much in his own grief to realize, what was happening with the twins. Certainly,
I mean, that must have been a very complicated thing to play. I mean, that's a lot going on, and going on there, because you have a character. Once again, you had the illness, the event that we are not going to fully go into for spoiler reasons. Then you have, once again, a very complicated situation and the failure on some level of from parenting becomes noticeable as the story unfolds. And you have to kind of deal with that realization as the actor as well, that here's a guy who maybe, even if he wasn't that, always present, tried or cared, and now he's seeing what came from that, and it's not good. None of it's good.
Yeah, Jeff, it's funny as a parent. Somebody said to me when my girls were first born, and we had 3 girls in 18 months, so it rained children for a minute. But I remember somebody saying, nobody gets out of childhood uninjured. And then they said, and nobody gets out of parenthood uninjured either.
I can believe that.
And yeah, you make mistakes. If I could go back, I would do it differently. When they were little, I thought I was shaping them to be something better than I was. I learned as I got older, my job was to just shape them to be who they were. but you learn.
That must be the rough thing about parenting, is that you learn as you go, and by the time you learn it, you've already made a mistake to begin with. And that's the unfortunate thing about life, I guess. The moment you learn it, you realize where the mistake came earlier on.
Yeah, and we all got them.
Yeah.
The question was, how much benevolence was in there and how much something else was in there. But I think in response to your question, that Victor kind of did the best he could. He didn't realize that the root was twisting. If he had, he probably would have done something about it. I mean, it was that, maybe.
Yeah.
I'll never know. I rely on those writers a lot, because they give me the path, they give me the footprint, the blueprint, and I try to follow it.
I will say, as the viewer and fan, I kind of wish, without giving spoilers away, there was more of the father scenes after one of the major reveals, and see what would have come of that. Because
I understand.
I feel like there's so much more interesting things going on with that father, what you could have done with it, and unfortunately, there wasn't as many scenes as I would like after that point in time of the story.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you. I understand the family aspect of it. There could have been more revealed there, but when you're working in mystery or suspense, the pace of edit has a lot to do with setting the tone of that. And I remember watching my wife when we were watching it together, Jeff. She couldn't hold still. She was like, she kept shifting. She'd get up, she'd sit down, and I was like, "Gotcha, didn't it?" She said, "Yeah," but the pace has a lot to do with it.
It does draw you in. I think when I first started watching, I was like, "What?" And then over time, you start getting sucked in. You're like, "Oh, this is working," because I think the premise is kind of weird to get your brain around. As the first episode, you're just like, "Wait, what? For how long? No way." I don't know how that would work. And then after a while, when you start getting sucked into it, and when the swapping starts happening very rapidly, you start forgetting who's who as well, and you start going, "Oh shit!" And then you start thinking about perception and point of view and everything else. It gets really kind of heady later on.
Yeah, it's very layered. I agree with you. I mean, I had the same experience. I would turn to Mary and say, "Is that Gina or is that Lenny? Or is that Gina playing Lenny or Lenny playing Gina?" And Mary goes, "Just shut up and watch the show."
Right. I would say,
okay.
There's one line, I can't remember which character. I don't think the story is supposed to say which character really says it, where the character mentions, "I don't even remember anymore necessarily which one's supposed to," something along those lines. "I don't even remember anymore which one I am," or necessarily. You know what scene I'm talking about? Like, I think it was towards the end.
And that's a very yeah.
And I'm thinking myself, right? I'm thinking myself, "Oh shit, that is a possibility with all the switching. It's possible you lose yourself back to a certain point where you don't even necessarily remember which one you're supposed to be in a very, not necessarily, you may know who you are, but who that personality is so been rewatched." Right. It's buried.
You can get lost.
Right.
You can get lost. And that's a grave danger. This, I think the show works on a lot of levels in that regard. It is, you can watch it as a mystery. You can watch it as a thriller because of the nature. There's betrayal, and there's a con game going on, and there's all kind of stuff. But you can unravel it at a lot of levels because of the family stuff. Where does that? There's a seed here and a seed there. If you pick that up, and I think about the performance, Matt Bomer. I watched his performance in that thing and went, "Geez, that guy's a good actor." They're all good. They really are. There's an old saying: if you want to play class baseball, play with class baseball players.
Right.
So I got to play with some class baseball players in this one.
I mean, I think it seems like there was a hint of a season 2. Do you think that's going to happen, or was there discussion of it?
Well, yes. I'm not saying yes to a season 2. There was certainly a discussion, because I think seeds are planted of a possibility. Now, whether or not they want to do that or can do it is another matter. It's above my pay grade, Jeff. I'd be just about the last one to know.
Well, like I said, I thought it was great, and another great. Karen Robinson was also phenomenal in as well, and I thought she did this. did a wonderful performance, and I wanted to see you two with more scenes together. Wait, I'm trying. I think you have like 1 or 2 scenes together. I think just
We
one
do. We do
maybe.
have a couple of scenes together, and I liked. It's funny you say that because Karen and I spent a lot of time together. We worked on that job for 4, almost 5 months, and so Karen and I, we would go to dinner together, or we'd go exploring around Wilmington, or just. And so I got to know her really well, and we became friends. But I love her performance in this.
Mm,
She's a lovely actress. She's a really, really lovely human being.
mm. So, for our listeners, it's on Netflix for anyone who wants to find it. And if you have a few minutes, I just want to ask about one other project that apparently you're a part of. I've not been able to see it though, but I've heard of it. It's called Bound, and it's a short film, and I heard that you're producing it. So you want to discuss a little bit about that? And
Yeah, I'm happy to tell you about it. A dear friend of mine, Mike Panuski, he and I did a film together 25 or 30 years ago, and he's just one of those actors I always watch, Jeff. I'm mindful of him when he's working. He's incredibly honest. Whenever he steps on screen, I just know, okay, things just got solid. Panuski's in this. And so we had talked about doing something together. And about 3 years ago, he called me. He said, "Michael, you still interested?" I said, "Of course I am, Mike. Of course I am." And he had written this piece about 2 brothers after their father passes. The father had been really hard on them, so they were estranged. It was not a happy family. And but the father dies, and they're forced to come back together to deal with the father's effects. And so the short film is that time of coming together.
mm,
And there's a lot of weather and something like that in a family. And so we did it. His wife Jay directed it, he wrote it, and Mary and I, my wife and I, were producers on it along with them. But it's in the festival circuit now. It's been submitted to different festivals, and
that's
we're going to
cool.
go and we'll see how it does.
Very cool. I do have one question. I read the summary on IMDb, and it said the brothers must make a life and death choice. Can you expand on what that choice refers to?
Not without tipping the 10 minutes
Mm,
or the 12 minutes, but yeah, they're forced into a crucible pretty quickly, and they have to deal with it one way or the other. Must deal with it. And the father had not died. I don't know that they would have come together at that moment to have to do that, but they
mm,
do. And so that's the conflict in the play, in the piece, and how do they resolve it? What's strange about it, Jeff? The more research we did, there's a lot of estrangement in families.
mm,
There's a tremendous percentage of families that are estranged. Painful. It's just painful to think that there's no way back.
mm.
So this little film poses a question: how do you get back?
Now, some short films are proof of concept, and they're looking for to make a feature length. Others are to show your aptitude. I'm a good producer, I'm a good director, I'm a good actor.
Yeah,
Now, what found? Which does it fall into? Are you proving that you're producing and do more producing? Is it a proof of concept to do a feature film?
no, it's neither of those things. It was something that we had in us that we wanted to explore, and so we explored it on film.
Mm,
And then once we had the film that we'd shot, we made our film. They always say there's the film you write, the film you shoot, then there's the film you edit.
mm.
And so we have it. I think we got as much as we could have gotten out of that script, quite frankly. So, but no, it's not a showcase. People either know who I am or they don't. They're not going to know more about who I am from this
Mm.
film. I'm not using it as a calling card. It was just an exercise in what I think of as creativity with Mike. For us to get a chance to work together again.
So regular people like me, where how do we get to see it?
You know, Pay attention to the film festivals that are around you, and hopefully it'll be in one of those. I think we've got a decent shot at that, and then eventually, after the festivals have all gone away, we'll create a link to it, Jeff, and then you can see it that way.
Very cool. I hope for the opportunity to go see it. I want to
I
thank you
hope
so
so too.
much, Mr. O'Neill. This was well above my expectations. I've been wanting to talk to you for a long while. Thank you so much.
Jeff, I enjoyed it. Thanks so much, bud.
Thank you. Have a great night, sir.
You too.